Hi, I'm Patty Sear, and I'm here to talk about obstacles to handicap parking, more commonly known as accessible parking. The media tends to focus on those who use the handicapped spaces that don't have the required permit, but as we'll see, the issues are much more than that. I often see two cars parked into one handicapped parking space. And I really became aware of this once when years ago I was living back east and I came out of the library. It was pouring rain. I saw a man completely blocked from getting into his car because another car had parked next to him in that one space. So we had to go into the library, find someone to track down the driver, who then went out to move his car. So it was a very unfortunate situation. And we also find this sometimes when people park over the cross-hatching, the diagonal lines to the side, and that's for wheelchair access, or if a van came in and they need to put the lift down, they need that space to bring the lift down and to maneuver around it. So I think the public really needs to be educated on this. Another thing I actually ran into at the same library, I had seen a man who was repeatedly using the space that shouldn't be. So I talked to him about it, and he just said he liked the convenience of the space, even though I knew it wasn't right. So after seeing him park there a few times, I decided to call the police one day to get him ticketed. So I called the local police, and they said due to staffing problems, they only had someone available once a week to do that. And unfortunately, the day I called was not the day. So if you find this is a situation, you can talk to your local police department. I think at one time they were training citizens to pass out tickets, so I'm not sure what they do in your area. Now, another thing I've come across, especially at supermarkets, they may have the handicapped parking spaces very close to the entrance, but perhaps only one exit, and so when you exit the store, you could be at the far end of the store, very far from where you originally parked. And this is very difficult for people with walking impairments. Some of them may not even be able to get back to their car. I also see sometimes delivery trucks blocking or using the handicapped parking spaces because it's convenient for them to run in and out of the facilities to deliver the packages. And I try to be kind to these drivers if I'm confronting them, because sometimes these small lots really don't have a place for these drivers to park to drop off mail or whatever, and they're in a tough situation. But unfortunately, I found that they tend to favor the handicap lots, especially if they're empty, thinking, well, no one's here. But if someone drives in and needed the space at the time, they're going to be blocked. And that actually happened to me on a few occasions. I was trying to go to my physical therapy appointment, and I drove in, and the UPS truck was in front of the space, and I couldn't get in. And it would have been too far for me to go around the block, to walk. So I had to wait in my car until he came out and moved. And we want to be careful also when confronting the driver, just in case they had some type of invisible impairment that we weren't aware of. Another thing I see on occasion is sometimes the handicapped parking space is on a treacherous slope. Now there are certain guidelines as to what the max slope can be, but in this case the slope was very profound, and certainly no one in a wheelchair could utilize that space, and even I think someone without a walking impairment would have found it very difficult to park in. And I think part of the problem with this is the law may require that the space be as close to the entrance as possible, and in this case it was the closest space, but unfortunately the slope just wasn't going to work out as an accessible space. Another thing I see is sometimes handicapped spaces don't have above ground handicapped parking signs, and they have just the printed symbol on the pavement, and when it snows you can't tell that it's a handicapped parking space. And again, we have to be careful because the laws are very complex. The signage and the number of spaces and so forth can depend on a lot of factors, the size of the lot and so forth. But if you're in a really large lot with a large number of parking spaces, you really should be seeing an above ground handicap parking sign. Here's a space that doesn't have one. And here's what happens when it snows. Now this is my car over there. I took this when I lived back east at a facility. And you can see there's no sign above the ground or on the wall, so that when that snow's covered, you can't distinguish it as a handicap parking space. And I've seen it much worse than this. Even after the plows come in, we had heavy snows, just very packed down the pavement. You just can't tell it's a handicap parking space if that above ground sign isn't there. So what I did was I contacted the lot owner, and you can usually find out who the lot owner is by contacting your town hall. And this lot owner was great. He put up signs all on the wall, so it helped to alleviate the problem. And I was actually able to accomplish this in some other towns near where I lived, where I found, similar issues. And most of the lot owners were great, so we got a lot of signs put up. It was really good. Another situation we have with the snow is sometimes those who plow tend to dump snow in the handicapped spaces, as you can see here. And if you look closely, you will find the sign embedded in the snow bank. And I think this happens sometimes because these spaces are on the end or in corners, so it's a convenient place. And we also have to keep in mind, the people that plow, they really need a lot of room to push that snow around. And it is a fact that signs of any kind really impede their plowing efforts. So this is something that really needs to be addressed. So what I did in this case, I contacted the lot owner again, and we tried to brainstorm what could be done. So the lot owner instructed the plowing team to move the signs when they plowed and place them back when they were done. And these were obviously the portable kind of signs, not the ones permanently in the ground. And it sounded great in theory, but as you'll see from these pictures, it didn't work out very well. I went back a few weeks after it had snowed and it was completely clear, because I wanted to find out what exactly happened to those signs. Well, you'll see they ended up on the side of the building, clearly not in the right place, and this one on the sidewalk. So I contacted the lot owner again, who then contacted the people who plow, and over time they eventually got it right, so our persistence finally paid off. Another problem I see is sometimes shopping carts block the handicap parking spaces, and I'm going to show you a picture. And in this one you also see a customer with infant parking sign that somehow ended up in the lot. So this space is not accessible. And I remember when the customer with infant parking signs came out, and on the one hand, the store is trying to please a variety of customers and their different situations and needs. But what really saddened me was when they did that, they would use sometimes 1 or 2 handicap parking spaces and turn them into customer with infant parking spaces. So that was a problem. And again, it's a situation where the owner is just trying to do the right thing to please a variety of needs of different customers. Now, another thing I want to talk about is that of invisible impairments. And I think sometimes when people see others pull into a handicapped parking space, they expect them to get out and get a wheelchair or pull a walker out. Now, there's a lot of people that are entitled to the space that don't need a walker or wheelchair, yet they have a valid impairment, and their impairments may be invisible. And I'm actually one of these people. And we sometimes get yelled at by others who think we're abusing the space. I try to be polite to these people, because if you think about it, they're on your side, they're trying to protect the space, but on the other hand, they shouldn't be screaming at people. I try to use it as an opportunity to educate the public about invisible disabilities, and I found sometimes people are great, they really do listen. Other times you're going to get people shrug their shoulders and get pretty mad and walk away. But that's something I think our public needs to be educated about as well. I also see sometimes, well, what I hear about is people who have a valid parking permit, and they had walking impairment, a medical problem where they really needed the space, but they no longer have that medical problem. They are no longer in need of the space, yet they continue to hang on to their handicap parking permit until it expires because they like the convenience of it. And that permit really should be returned to the Department of Motor Vehicles or the appropriate agency where it was originally obtained from. And I likewise see this sometimes with people using the permit of deceased relatives as well. Another thing that comes up is the topic of HOAs, homeowner associations. I'm not going to go into that in great detail. The laws revolving around handicap parking and homeowners associations are very complex. It's a balance for the association, meeting the legal needs, the extreme expenses that can be involved, and trying to determine what they legally have to do. It's a very difficult, frustrating situation to deal with. And that's something I think our society needs to address, and that would be great if we could have some type of universal agreement about what happens with the homeowners association regarding the handicap parking. Another issue is actually the handicap parking sign itself. It has a wheelchair on it, but as we were talking about before, that's not going to portray those with invisible impairments. So many years ago, I and my family members and friends kind of brainstormed and would try to come up with ideas. What could we do to change that handicap parking sign? So we came up with 4 prototypes that we did submit to actually try to get new symbols on that sign, and unfortunately none of them were approved. We kept the standard wheelchair symbol on it, but what we also added were symbols to reflect invisible impairments, and we also came up with some other ideas that we thought were great. But trying to get these approved are very complex. You have to meet certain font styles and letter size and all sorts of things. So it's hard to pull off as an individual, and I'd like to see colleges get involved, maybe some of the graphic arts students or artists or some of the law students, and get together and try to come up with something. I think it would be a great thing to do and could really help our society a lot in terms of understanding invisible illnesses more. So, what can we do to help prevent these obstacles? Well, there's a lot of things we can do. If you like to write, you could write articles. If you like to take pictures and put them on a website in a tactful way, explaining the obstacles. You could try to get a spot in a TV or radio show. If you have adult learning centers in your area, you could try to teach a class. We could pass out flyers. I had flyers that I designed myself that I got approved by the state that I was able to pass out I passed them out at senior centers, hospitals, and libraries. And you always have to get permission to pass out the flyers, but I did a lot of that when I was living back east. I had talked to the Department of Motor Vehicles back east to see if they could put some of these obstacles in their driver's ed manual, and I wasn't allowed to do that, but they did allow some wording in a podcast, which was good. So at least we had that, and I don't know if that's still there. I also think our educational system could get a little more involved by using puppets and teaching kids at a young age to respect the spaces. I think they do some of this now, but I think we really need to give a tremendous focus on this in our educational system. So for the serious-minded, you can contact the U.S. Department of Justice, do an online search. There's an ADA, American with Disabilities Act, toll-free number you can call to talk about all kinds of issues like this. You could try calling your state to see how their guidelines are affected in your city as well. So there's a lot we can do, and just do some online searches. So I hope that I've enlightened you, and let's all do what we can to help make these spaces truly accessible. And I thank you so much for listening today. I deeply appreciate it.